Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here. And we're still getting these comments on our videos from a crook. And he uses my Can-Am logo to represent himself on a Telegram account. I don't want you to be taken in by this. This person is obviously a piece of garbage. He has nothing to do other than sit in his mom's basement and post time after time after time on our site, trying to haul you people in. I've made complaints to YouTube. I've asked to be taken down. I have to get an intern to come in and take them down, and I do it every day. So we'll keep doing it, but I want you to be aware of it. I don't want you to think that we're allowing this to go on. We aren't. And it really irritates the heck out of me. So, enough about that. The National Park Service, big part of my life. I've applied to film in the parks, been denied. Yes, we have to apply again. They appealed the original verdict, and they got a liberal judge to award them a temporary reprieve where they require permits again, even though it's our park. I could go in there with one camera, and if I'm going to use it in a movie, they're going to charge me. And if I don't, they're going to arrest me. It's an amazing situation, folks. It truly is. And then they can control whether I go in and film or not because they can deny it. It's crazy. It's crazy. But that's the Park Service. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm not. I have several friends that are with the Park Service right now as rangers and retired rangers. And one of the retired rangers sent me this note. This was posted today on PEER.org. And what it says is that bad actors awarded top Park Service jobs. So when you go into the Park Service, I want you to know what you're going to be faced with. It says, allergy to accountability afflicting Park Service undermines morale. Washington, D.C. A new management appointment indicates that serious financial misconduct is still not a barrier to promotion in the top ranks of the National Park Service. This lack of accountability for senior officials compared to the harsh treatment of online staff has been a sore point for driving down employees' morale, according to the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility, PEER. In the latest example, on September 29, 2023, NPS named Ed Clark as the new superintendent of the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. In 2016, the Office for Inspector General, the IG, for the Interior Department, found that Clark improperly solicited and accepted $23,000 in travel vouchers from a private group while the superintendent of Gettysburg National Military Park. In addition, Clark requested and pocketed full National Park Service per diem disbursement for meals and travel on the days he was paid in private funds. It's called double dipping. The IG referred the matter to the Justice Department, which declined to prosecute, of course. Rather than firing Clark, the NPS moved him to its Pacific Regional Office to serve as a senior project manager. In the press release for his new posting, the NPS made no mention of the IG report, but instead noted that while at Gettysburg, Clark had built strong partnerships and provided strategic leadership for one of the nation's premier Civil War battlefields. Wow. His case echoes that of Michael Caldwell, who, while Northeast Regional Director of the Park Service, committed $17,000 in travel reimbursement fraud, according to another IG report. The Justice Department also declined prosecution. Well, of course. They don't care. NPS moved Caldwell to a special assistant slot in headquarters, where he now serves as the chief of staff for its Planning, Facilities, and Lands Directorate. The National Park Service should not be promoting employees who commit financial fraud, remarked PEER Executive Director Tim Whitehouse. The immunity from punishment enjoyed by Park Service's inner circle is one reason the agency has such a lousy morale, end of quotes. White House points to internal surveys seeking to find out why the Park Service has the lowest morale of all Interior Department agencies and among the lowest in federal service. One such report, called NPS Voices, cited the total lack of accountability for misconduct among superintendents and other senior officials who are transferred or even promoted rather than given realistic and appropriate consequences, end of quotes. Quote, senior Park Service officials have such a sense of impunity, they are often called the untouchables by staff, added White House. If ever a federal agency needed a new broom to sweep it clean, it's the Park Service, end of quotes. I'd have to agree 1,000%. My experience with line personnel has been nothing less than stellar. Management, it's been horrific. And when I say horrific, I mean horrific. They make arbitrary and capricious decisions that has no relative sense of fact each time I've dealt with them. What can I say? But I don't think they care what I say, realistically. Now, we're going to talk to you about two cases, both in Canada, and both in the same exact location 1 year apart from each other. Yeah, it was pretty strange when I researched these cases and I found them. I couldn't believe it. Now, just west of this, there's 3 disappearances on our Canadian map. Now, these cases are new. You won't find them anywhere, but away we go. First case involves a man named John Ewing. He's 40 years old. He went missing October 8th, 1955 on the Old Hope Princeton Trail, 17 miles southwest of Princeton, BC. Princeton, just north of the Canadian-U.S. border. The Canadian-U.S. border is down in this area. Princeton's up here. This is East Ladner, Eastgate, East Manning Provincial Park, Cascade Recreational Area. Southwest of Princeton, in the middle of nowhere here, in the Whipsaw Creek drainage is where this all happened. Now, John wasn't your normal guy. He was an intellectual by far. He was in the Royal Air Force during the war, and he was stationed at a place called Patricia Bay in British Columbia from 1942 to 1945. He liked it a lot. And he graduated from the University of British Columbia in 1963 with a law degree. And he moved to Toronto. He eventually came to Princeton in 1952, and he was considered an expert mountaineer and climber. He was well known in the Princeton law circles for his prior work and his intellectual capability. Now, John told his wife on October 8th that he was going to go on an exploratory hike up the old Princeton Trail. And his wife knew that he'd be gone the majority of the day, but he was considered an expert hiker. He knew the outdoors well. And when he didn't come back, his wife called the RCMP, who immediately called for reinforcements. And immediately when they were reported, it started to snow in the area. Well, it snowed real hard on the 9th of October, and on the 10th, the RCMP got a helicopter and ground searchers in there. A civilian helicopter that was hired by John's wife flew two people around the area, and the RCMP put 2 tracking dogs in there to try to look for John. Mrs. Ewing knew right away that something was wrong, thus the hiring of the helo. She said that he carried 2 chocolate bars and he had light clothing. He wasn't prepared for any snow because it was only going to be gone for the day. The the private helicopter that she hired because she knew something was really wrong. She'd been with him for a lifetime. And there were also 2 planes from the Chilliwack Flying Club that participated in this event. Now, Mrs. Ewing also said that her and John had a hike planned for the next day that they were both excited about. So John knew not to be gone and not to exhaust himself too much, and this is what was confusing to Mrs. Ewing. On the 11th and the 12th of October, searchers continued going over the area in an expanded region, dividing it into grid lines and being accountable for each area. And it was that Whipsaw Creek Basin where he was seen by some hunters earlier in the day that he was out. They stated that he came into their camp, talked to him for quite a while, explained that he was just on an exploratory hike, and they wished him well, and he continued up the canyon. This was confirmed sighting. On October 14th, they searched the canyon again. They had airplanes up that day, and what they were looking for is smoke from campsites, possibly that John had made. On October 15th, the search shifted to east of Whipsaw Creek when searchers found what they called fresh tracks. 100 searchers converged on that area, and they combed it for 2 days. They were confused. They didn't know what to think. So they moved up higher on the ridge from where they saw these, because they were heading uphill, which didn't make sense for somebody who was missing. And they went up to a place called Skagit Ridge. It was a large area, and they covered it by air and on the ground, and with canines. Now, when these searchers say that they found tracks, did they find tracks of him in snowshoes, in boots? It's kind of perplexing because it doesn't explain. Well, during this, they debriefed with Mrs. Ewing again, and she stated that he was a very experienced hiker in very good shape for being 40 years old. Both the Ewings had come there from the United Kingdom. John had recently, in the last 3 years, established a very good law practice in Princeton. They were all confused because of these tracks that they found late in the search that were fresh, because they had put 3 additional days in a search to finding where these tracks went, and they went into nothingness. How many times have you heard that before? Well, by October 31st, volunteer searches, the formal searches, everything was canceled. And on the 31st, Mrs. Ewing wrote a note in the local paper thanking searchers for their effort, even under snow and rain conditions, which it did on them. The total search area was 20 square miles, according to searchers. They searched up to 5,000 feet in elevation, and they had broken the area up into 11 search grids that they had gone over, they estimated, at least 5 times each. John was never found. And again, I'm saying he was considered an intellectual. Weather encumbered the searchers. He was hanging out with hunters who were in the area. He wasn't specifically hunting, though. And canines had helped search for him. What happened? Well, I'd say it must have been a fluke. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but kind of rare in Canada that a plain old hiker disappears. But I nearly fell out of my chair when I was researching that case, and I saw search and rescue notes on another case in the same spot, almost exactly a year later. Whipsaw Creek. Harvey Garrison from Princeton, 18 years old, went missing October 19th, 1956. Now, John disappeared October 8th, 1955. But friends, again, I'll show you the map. The exact same drainage. Now, I'm not saying this has never happened, but I really racked my mind on this, and I can't remember the exact same location 2 years in a row. Now, like I said, people have disappeared from this area just west. There's 3 people missing. But this is turning into a cluster, that's for sure. So Harvey is hunting with a buddy, and they were going to go hunt there for the day. And his friend's name was Clarence MacIver. And in the middle of the day of hunting, they decided to split up, and they would meet back at the end of the day at Harvey's truck. Well, at the end of the day, MacIver gets back to the truck. Harvey's not there. It's getting real cold. He crawls inside the truck, falls asleep. Now, I wouldn't hunt with somebody like this. Let me just say that. Because you're the life link to Harvey. If he's up there with a broken leg and you go to sleep and you forget about him, he may die up there. MacIver went to sleep. Well, Harvey's parents knew that he was supposed to be home that night. So very early, 6 o'clock the next morning, they report him missing, and they tell RCMP where he said he would park his truck. Well, on October 20th, when Harvey hadn't returned, the RCMP went out looking. And at 10 a.m., search and rescue found MacIver sleeping in Harvey's truck. They knock on the truck door. He opens it up. They say, "What is going on?" He explains he was sorry. He fell asleep, but that Harvey never came back, and he was going to wait a little bit more, and then he was going to go in the city and look for help. Well, RCMP immediately calls for search and rescue, and they ask him to explain where Harvey would have been, and he says, "Oh, he was in a Whipsaw Creek drainage where I last saw him." Uh-oh. Well, they immediately call for fish and game officers. They call for any RCAF personnel. They call for any military personnel that may be in the area. And RCMP sends a battalion in there. And 100 searchers, RCMP, friends, family, and fish and game, search October 21st and 22nd in that drainage. They don't find anything. And they did some interesting things. First of all, this is Harvey. Good kid. Really good kid. I liked it when I read the story about him. Hardworking, good athlete. Could take care of himself. Now, something on this case, and I'm going to say it again, and I say it every time I deal with a hunter, is that you're a hunter and you're missing or you're hurt. Fire off 3 rounds. That means to the other hunters in the area, somebody's in bad shape. Wait an hour, hour and a half, shoot off another 3 rounds, and people will slowly hone in on you. This is why, as a hunter, you always carry at least 21 rounds. So you can get out 7 rounds, 7 cycles of this 3. Always. That's like the universal sign for hunters. Now, October 23rd, a new batch of 100 searchers are coming into the area from Princeton. And this time, some fresh game wardens get up to 6,000 feet, 1,000 feet higher than they did for John Ewing. And up at 6,000 feet, with canines assisting, they reported some fresh tracks. And this was puzzling, because they were in 2 feet deep snow. They hadn't found any tracks down lower. And if somebody was still alive, namely Harvey, he would have went down lower to where his truck was. But what are tracks doing at 6,000 feet? Just like tracks on Ewing at 5,000 feet. Why couldn't you follow them if there's 2 feet of snow? MacGyver told search and rescue that Harvey had a rifle, bullets, and warm clothes. But bad weather was inundating the area at about this time. So the RCMP had already called for a helicopter and it couldn't make it. So they put the helicopter on a truck and they trucked it to the scene. I like that resiliency. I've never heard that done. October 24th, it was reported, new tracks are found near a place called Granite Creek below 4,500 feet. The RCMP and the game warden said that they thought he was wandering in circles. Well, Harvey's father had been on site for 3 days, had been in the woods calling his name, hadn't heard anything. But now, game wardens and the RCMP started to get a little mystified. So they put a series of 5 people in the woods in the middle of the night to listen to what they could hear. Because they thought he was moving around at night, which doesn't make any sense at all. Facts makes none. October 26th to the 28th, 70 men were on the ground and divided into 2 groups looking for Harvey. The helicopter had arrived and it flew 2 consecutive days at low elevation, and they had a plane that arrived that was flying higher looking for fires and things. People were seriously frustrated. They didn't want to give up because they kept finding tracks. Tracks of who or tracks of what? That's really the million-dollar question. But it kept them tempted, and it kept them there. And from the 27th to the 28th, the search slowly started to slow down. Until one searcher said, hey, Harvey has a dog. Let's bring the dog to the scene. So they bring Harvey's dog in. And they bring the dog up into the woods. And it didn't want any business being up there. It didn't show any interest. Didn't show anything about wanting to even look for Harvey. So, October 29th, only 12 searchers remained. And the searchers were confining themselves to that area between 4,500 and 6,000 feet where they had seen fresh tracks. Now again, friends, you guys are smart. I've told you all along, there's always been at least 2 feet of snow in this area they're searching. If you find fresh tracks, how do you lose tracking in the snow with fresh tracks? I want to know. Because they kept losing them. Well, that keeps telling me that they find tracks that are starting, but they don't find tracks that keep going. Notice how that sounds? Well, on October 29th, there were snow flurries throughout the day, so weather inhibited the search, slowed everybody down, made it very cold. In this part of Canada, it gets really cold. October 30th, all search and rescue was canceled. None of Harvey's equipment was ever found. Multiple searches continued for 4 years. Family went in there, friends, off and on in the summer. When they wanted to do a hike, they went in there. When search and rescue did training, they went in there. And they went in there. Why? They had 2 people that were missing. They hadn't found any of the gear. Rifles, boots. They don't go. They stay forever. Hundreds, remember this, hundreds of hunters combed that area for the following 25 years. Never found them. It was a good hunting area. Hunters go off trail. They're not like hikers. They go off trail. They walk through the bush. If any area where a person would have been found, it would have been this area. But they had 2 people missing, and neither one was found. call that nearly impossible over 25, 30 years. And as I've told you before, hiking boots last essentially forever. A hunting rifle will last forever. It's very, very, very odd that two people disappear in the same location almost exactly a year apart and are never found. I call that at least 1 in 50,000. Very rare. Now, what are the similarities? In some weird sense, you can call them both hunters. They were both up in the area during hunting season, but one was a hiker and an intellectual, 40 years old, still young, and another was 18 years old, quite young. Both were in really good health. Both would be considered mountaineers. Harvey's last name was Garrison. John's last name was Ewing. Do the research. Harvey's parents participated in the search and continued to search for him years later. John Ewing was somebody who had made himself in life. One thing that John did was when he came out of law school, he participated in the Nuremberg trials in Toronto against Nazis. He was on one of the attorneys for Canada. He was very smart. He was very quick. Now, in John's case, they went to 5,000 feet in elevation. In Harvey's case, they went to 6,000 feet. That extra 1,000 feet means a lot, folks, especially in this terrain because it gets cold and the snow gets deeper very quick. It would have been impossible not to have people that were on Harvey's case in 1956 that were not on the Ewing case in 55. That had to be in the back of their minds. So searchers are looking for Harvey. I have no doubt in their mind they're still looking for the remains of John. And neither person was ever found. I did look in that area 10, 12, 15, 20 years later. I couldn't find anything more. But it would have been surprising to me if that area didn't get significant press in the BC papers after the disappearance of Harvey Garrison. Now, some people could say, well, maybe John Ewing had a medical issue at 40 years old. Yeah, possible. But where's his body? Come on, where's the body? Now, Harvey Garrison having a medical issue at 18? I don't think so. Harvey was at the prime of health, and if he was walking around in those woods days after the search, as they think he might have been, then why didn't he fire off his rifle to get people to find him? Personally, I don't think that was Harvey walking around those woods. And why would Fish and Game put people in the woods in the middle of the night? Think about that. That's why these two cases are very particularly interesting to me. One of these days, if I get up into that area, I'm going to Whipsaw Creek. I'm going to see what kind of area that is and go into Princeton and try to find some people that may be related to the Ewings and the Garrisons and get their feelings about really what happened. Now, I know that there's a lot of people in British Columbia that watch this. If you know anybody who's related to those fine two men, please turn them on to this because I'd be interested to know what they thought. And over the years, if there's other disappearances in that Whipsaw Creek drainage area. But in the meantime, thank you for being here. If you found this segment educational and interesting, give it a thumbs up. Please share it on your social media, especially if you're in Canada, in British Columbia. And please do not buy my books on Amazon. You'll get ripped off. Those are resellers selling it for $100, $150. Go to our website, NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. You can buy my books for $25. And buy DVDs of our latest movies, buy our latest hats. I'll sign every hat for you. And in the meantime, be nice to the people in your community. We live in rough times right now. Everyone needs to be given a break. And older people with disabilities, let's give them a helping hand. Oh, by the way, Huck said I'm working her too hard, so she needed a break. Paulides out.